Good afternoon, Glendale friends and residents. My name is Roland Kedikian, and I am happy to be with you again today. We are doing a special show today, Sunday, with regards to the Grayson power plant upgrade. My regular show airs on Monday nights at 7:30 p.m., and we discuss general issues about Glendale. And in fact, the first show which we did was about the Grayson power plant upgrade. My usual show is in Armenian, and due to the importance of this particular issue, we set up a special show today about the Grayson power plant in English to encourage everybody to be involved in this particular project, which will have substantial impact on Glendale finances and utility rates. And today, to make this program more involved, more comprehensive, and also invite you to call in, we have the live phone number stated on the TV channel over there. As we discuss this subject, I would encourage everybody to call in and discuss and ask your questions, raise your concerns. This is a community event which we would like to as many people to know about as possible. After today, we will be also posting this on Facebook and YouTube. So if you hear this and you realize a friend, a relative, or a neighbor in Glendale needs to know about these topics, make sure you visit the website, which is www.kedikian.tv, or on YouTube you can search Grayson Power Plant Upgrade, or on Facebook for the Glendale Coalition website or the Glendale Environmental Coalition website or Facebook. You will find this program. It's very important, apart from learning what you hear today, is to let other people know. Today, I have assembled a special set of friends of Glendale, groups who are concerned about what is happening with regards to the Grayson power plant upgrade. Today, I have with me to my right, Daniel Brockman. Daniel is a teacher of economics at the Glendale College. He is also the co-founder of the Glendale Environmental Coalition, which pushes for a sustainable, low-carbon future for Glendale. Dan, thank you for joining us. Let me introduce everybody, and then we'll start on the program. Next to Dan is Evan Gillespie. Evan is a deputy director with the Sierra Club. He manages the organization's effort to transition from the fossil fuel to clean energy in California and the Southwest. And finally, at the end, I have with me Frank Gallo. Frank is a financial planner with over 25 years of experience in the field. He is also the co-founder and the president of the Glendale Coalition for Better Government, which advocates for responsible, transparent, and responsive local government. Thank you, gentlemen. Thank you for joining us today. I hope we will have a good discussion. And again, I encourage everybody who is watching this to pay attention, and when you have a question or a concern, or you feel you can contribute to anything we are saying, call the phone number and we will take your phone call and address you or have you be heard. It's important that everybody gets involved in this. So to begin the program a little bit, I'm going to give you a little bit of small history about Grayson. The Grayson power plant was built back in 1941. And it was built for the purpose of providing reliable power for the city. As it grew, back in 1941, power was an issue, so they built the Grayson power plant. And over time, the plant expanded and expanded as the city expanded. And currently, we have about 9 big generation units. Out of the 9, 8 are about 40 or more years old, which have degraded. And currently there is consideration with Glendale Water and Power Management that they are considering about upgrading all of these 8 power generation units with bigger 4 power generation units. In addition to the upgrading of these units, they are adding additional capacity. Some of it is in consideration of potential selling it outside for the future for possibly generation of income. And these are the concerns that this group of residents and involved community activists have with regards to the finances of this particular upgrade, which at $500 million if we consider it as being amortized over 30 years at 4%, would add up to about 850 million. And to kind of give you a feel of what kind of an increase this will cause on your utility rates, we anticipate approximately 12% increase will happen just because of this upgrade. It has nothing to do with future cost of electricity or future cost in operating the plant. This is just for the money to upgrade this plant. We expect, in my calculation, about a 12% increase. So clearly it's going to have a huge financial impact. More importantly, sometimes, is the health impact that it potentially has. We are in an industry that is transitioning to more environmental friendly capacity. We are seeing new generation methods coming up, whether it's solar, wind, or battery, to store and efficiently manage the power. And we are wondering if these have been properly taken into consideration prior to this upgrade, which is solely being done using gas generation. So today, let's have this discussion. And to begin with, I will begin asking Dan about how he got involved in this, and maybe he can articulate his concerns to begin with. Go ahead, Dan.
Okay. Thank you, Roland, and it's an honor to be on this program and to be speaking to this audience. I'm actually a relatively recent resident of Glendale. I moved here about 2.5 years ago, and I teach at Glendale College. I just, by accident, I think, picked up the news press in February and saw a little article that talked about what they were planning on doing. And, you know, I've been concerned about climate and environment for a long time, and I just thought, this doesn't really make a lot of sense. I know there's a lot of great new technology, renewables and storage, and people are moving away from fossil fuel generation, and I thought, you know, I got to look into this. So I started researching it, and basically, you know, I really just began researching it in probably June, July. And what I found is, you know, initially it was really the environmental concerns that I had. You know, why would we be increasing the amount of greenhouse gases we're emitting? California's burning. We know all about the risks of climate change. And we know the air is bad here, so I knew that was an issue. But as I started looking into it, I also found that there's some very serious financial risks, and that you know, that this could, depending on how it plays out, could put a very significant burden on Glendale ratepayers and residents for decades. So that's really what got me thinking about this.
And you put together this Glendale Environmental Coalition. Why don't you tell us a little bit about that coalition, how it came about, and what are the concerns you are hearing from the Glendale residents who live here and are very much concerned about this upgrade, both from the health perspective and the finances?
Well, you know, we started the Glendale Environmental Coalition just a few months ago. I was sitting with some friends. We were talking about what's going on, and you know, one of the things I realized is that very few people in Glendale knew what was going on. I would say today, very few people know what is going on. Glendale Water and Power has not really made an effort to get out and communicate this with the community. So we, you know, we just decided, let's create a Facebook group and let's just start getting people we know to join and start talking about it. And we're now at something like 250 people. And a lot of people are very active. I'm having a meeting at my house, and I'm expecting more than 20 people to show up. In particular, a lot of parents of young children that are in the vicinity of the plant. You know, we have a lot of elementary schools. We have Franklin, we have Edison, and Mark Keppel that are all within 2 miles of the plant. And so a lot of those parents are thinking, you know, I don't want my children breathing dirtier air than they're already breathing. We know in Los Angeles we already fail to meet EPA standards, and this would just make it worse. So I would say that's really where, you know, a lot of people started coming out and expressing concern.
Thank you, Dan. By the way, I forgot to mention, for those who speak Armenian, I would also encourage you to call. Հեռացայնեցեք աստիվին, որ գերեվի գոր եւ ծեր հարցումները գրնակ հարցնել եւ ես անգլերենի պիտի թարգմանեմ, ինչպես որ խոսինք որ հոստեղը Grayson Power Plant upgrade-ին մասին է, գրեթե մեր նույնը որ խոսինք որ այսօր, եւ ինչպես որ կհասկանաք որ ասիգա մեր տրամական եւ առողջապահական մտահոգություններու մասին է. All right, back to let's get a little bit Evan involved in the discussion. Evan, you are from the Sierra Club, and I believe your concerns are environmental, but also possibly financial. Why don't you tell us a little bit about the Sierra Club, your involvement, and what are your concerns?
Sure. So a little bit of background about the Sierra Club. So the Sierra Club is the largest, oldest environmental organization in the country. We were founded here in California. We have our largest chapter here in the Los Angeles region. We have about 55,000 members and supporters across LA County, including many here in Glendale. And our mission is to explore, protect, and enjoy the planet. And so a big threat right now to our planet is climate change and the air pollution that comes along with it. And so, in my role at the Sierra Club, I oversee our work to help transition the country and really the state of California away from fossil fuels. And so we are heavily involved in debates and discussions about new power plants and the transition away from those power plants to clean energy up and down the state, including here in Glendale, as well as in Los Angeles and up north as well. So we look at a lot of projects like this, and I'll start just by saying that I have some empathy for the utility because they are navigating a transition in an industry that's changing very, very, very quickly. I think many people are familiar with the transition happening in telecommunications, whether it be the move from your landline to your cell phone to being able to get the internet and email, all these different new technologies you can get in the palm of your hand. We're seeing a very, very similar transition happen in the electric industry right now, and that creates huge risks. For one thing, we know that fossil fuels, the fuel that supplied our power for a long time, is highly damaging, as Dan mentioned. It's making us sick, it's creating asthma and other health conditions for residents here in Glendale as well as people all over the country. It's warming our planet, and it's also having a tremendous, now increasingly, impact on our finances. So just in the last many years, we've seen a precipitous drop in the cost of clean energy. We know that solar is reliable, we know that wind is reliable, the technology works. What has been surprising to many people is just how quickly the cost has come down. And so
to add to Evan's point here, one of the concerns which we had discussed before is we are transitioning more and more and faster to environmental friendly generation, whether it's solar. And here we are back in almost 2020, we are going to spend $500 million on a very old technology. And there are some upcoming legislation, which Evan might talk about, which will probably prohibit gas generation in California. So we would possibly end up with a 500 million power plant sitting idle that cannot generate because laws have come down from Sacramento saying no longer generation of power with gas. We have to generate it with environmental options such as solar, wind, or battery for storage. So those are some of the concerns. Am I correct, Evan?
Yeah, that's right. There used to be a time when we had to make a choice between protecting the environment and protecting the economy. And what we have today is this amazing, beautiful moment when the cheapest thing to do to power our grid is also the best thing for the environment. And so that's why you have state leaders and other utilities around the state who are saying, hey, look, we're going to get entirely off of fossil fuels. So there's legislation right now in the Capitol that would mandate the transition away from fossil fuels to 100% clean energy by 2045. Other neighboring utilities like the Department of Water and Power in Los Angeles are doing their own planning ahead of that legislation because they know that if they're behind the 8 ball and they're the last to move along and adopt, they're going to be left saddled with stranded assets and higher costs for their customers. So there's a lot of benefit to getting out in front of this transition, but at a minimum, the state is saying very clearly, we are moving away from fossil fuels. And so for the people of Glendale, there's a huge risk if the utility moves ahead and ignores the rest of the utility landscape and continues to stick with the past when everybody, whether it be because it's the best thing for the environment, the best thing for your pocketbook, or because it's state law, everybody else is beginning to move away from these types of technologies.
Thank you, Evan. And for the callers who are calling, I see the lights are blinking, and I would appreciate if you keep holding a little bit. Let me introduce Frank Gallo. Frank is the president of the Glendale Coalition. And Frank, why don't you tell us about your concerns about this project?
Well, actually, with the Glendale power plant, we have quite a few concerns regarding the transfer of money from the utility to the general fund. As many of you probably know, the Glendale Coalition for Better Government was formed back in 2013 when the city decided to increase the utility rates for the electricity to transfer money actually to the general fund. Originally, it was presented to the people as if it was an increase to pay for the cost needed to maintain the utility. But in reality, the money was transferred to pay for costs that were completely unrelated to the utility. That was in violation of the city charter, and it was also in violation of Prop 218 and Prop 26.
And just to add to Frank's point, now I started this discussion by saying that it's been 40 years that these equipment, these gas generations have not been upgraded. Why has it taken this long to not maintain these? And if we had maintained it properly up until now, would we have had this huge project on our hands? So to begin with our callers, I'm going to take my first caller. Hello, can you please state your name and your question?
Yes, good afternoon. My name is Anna, and I would like to, I'm glad you have this discussion. It's very interesting. What I would like to know is that, first of all, how it's going to be affecting our bills. And I believe I heard you mentioning something about anticipating a 12% rate. And what are really, in reality, the advantages of advancing for this plant power to be upgrading it? What are the advantages of that? I would like to...
Thank you, Anna. Thank you, Anna. Your questions are very good. The first question was with regards to finances, and that's my calculation based on the information I have. The utility is going to cost $500 million to upgrade, and they don't have the fund to just do it and build it cash. So this is money that they will have to borrow, and the way utilities or cities borrow money is by issuing a bond and paying an interest. Much like when you buy a house, you get a mortgage and you have an interest and you pay it. So if you get a mortgage of $500 million and you start paying for it, after 30 years, you look how much you paid, you end up paying about $850 million. And if you translate that, that's an increase on your utility of about 12%. With regards to the concerns as to why we need it, well, we need it probably because some of these equipment is really old. The question is not whether we need it, is whether we need all of it is the question. The upgrade that is being contemplated is additional power that we may not necessarily need, particularly when we are looking at the future needs. We anticipate in the future for having less electric need, either because of use of more efficient systems and or better transmission. So that is the concern. We, in general, the need for this is not the question or the sole question. The question is, do we need this big of an upgrade, and why do we need this much of an upgrade? And maybe Evan or Dan, you want to jump in and answer this question from your perspective.
Yeah, I mean, I think that there are a couple of things. I mean, certainly you need electricity to keep the lights on, so it's got to come from somewhere. The question for us is, why build a power plant this big? And then secondly, is this the best technology to provide reliable and cost-effective electricity? So one of the best practices that other utilities in the state have adopted, Southern California Edison, Los Angeles Department of Water, now Pacific Gas and Electric up north, is before you go out and you build a new power plant or you extend the life of a new power plant, go out and do a competitive solicitation and say, hey, so we need electricity or we need these other services that a power plant provides, but there are other technologies that provide those same services, and maybe they do it more cost effectively. And through a competitive bidding process, which I think a lot of people can find agreeable, you can arrive at a solution where you will provide reliable electricity, you provide it more cost effective than you would have otherwise if you just decide, hey, we're going to spend $500 million on a power plant. You know that you've gotten the cheapest option, and increasingly the cheapest option is the cleanest option. And so we think that you can provide the same electricity services for less money and without the environmental impact if you were to move in a direction away from this power plant and instead build something different. So the first step from our perspective is to go out and do that competitive solicitation. Let the market compete. Let a power plant developer, let a solar developer, let an energy storage developer compete against each other, knowing that we need to keep the lights on and we need to keep reliable service, but there are a lot of options to do that today.
So to Anna's question, it's not the question whether we need or the advantages. We all need electricity. I think we all agree on. However, GWP conducted a study, and I'm going to ask Dan to talk a little bit more about the study they did and the different options they presented, but you also had concerns as to what that study entailed or did not entail more, and what was it missing, and how we could have done the study better to have all options on the table when we discuss what we need. So Dan, why don't you tell us about that
I want
study?
to reiterate some of the things that you said, Roland. You know, this is an old plant, and I have a lot of respect for the people of Glendale Water and Power. We don't want to be beating up on them. There are a lot of people, they work very hard to keep this plant operating and to keep our lights on, and they've done a great job.
Yes.
But it's, you know, it's an old plant. Something needs to be done. It may not be, you know, immediate, but certainly from an environmental point of view, we don't like the plant because it's not a very clean plant. It's old technology. But, you know, they did a study and they came out and they're calling this a repowering. You'll notice if you look at their materials, they call it a repowering. The reason they call it a repowering is because normally a repowering is just when you take out existing equipment, old equipment, and you put in new, more modern equipment. What I learned as I started studying this is that this really is not just a repowering. This is an expansion, and a pretty significant expansion. If you just look at what they're taking out and what they're putting in, the equipment that they're putting in is about 40%, has about 40% more capacity than the equipment that they're removing. On top of that, this equipment is designed, some of it anyway, is designed to run around the clock. So the general manager of Glendale Water and Power, not too long ago, at a city council meeting, said that they're going to be tripling the actual generation. So they're growing the capacity by about 40%. That's just what the plant can produce. But because they're going to be running it so much more, they actually are going to triple the generation. So that's really, you know, we really have a couple issues. One is, why are you expanding it like this? And the second issue is, you know, yeah, we want to find an alternative to what we have now. But as Evan was saying, there are a lot of other good alternatives out there that are clean and that aren't going to harm our children. And we need to be studying those, and they really haven't studied those.
Right, and to add to Dan's point, the study that was conducted provided options, but these options were not comprehensive, as if I understand the way you're thinking about it. Am I correct?
Yeah, and there's one other thing I could say
Sure.
about the study. So the study was done by a group called PACE Global. PACE Global is a subsidiary of Siemens. It's interesting that the equipment that Glendale Water and Power is proposing to buy is all Siemens equipment. So you had a group that came in and they designed kind of what are the alternatives for Grayson, and they looked at a few different things, but really at the end of the day, it was almost designed to propose not only gas, but the largest possible gas plant option of all the ones they looked at. Then we went into the environmental impact study process. And the group that did the environmental impact study is called Stantec. And they went through and they, you know, basically tried to make it show that we're not going to have a huge impact on the environment. But you have to remember that Stantec is basically the general contractor. They're what's called the owner's engineer. They are not only doing the study, the environmental study, but they will actually be the ones that will oversee the entire demolition and rebuilding of the new power plant. So when you kind of think about where this is coming from, you have to wonder, you know, did they really make the effort that they should have made
To get a
to
fully
find
independent
alternatives?
study.
Yeah.
Okay. Let's take our next caller. Hello, can I have your name and your question, please?
Power plant.
Hello?
Yes, I have the question how about we have built solar panel. It's okay?
Say that again, or gam hayranov garnagasel?
Yedim solar panel connect kala tape
Nerogutun chem garnar haskanal yegeme gada garnagasel hajis.
yedim solar panel tanik
That's a very good question. So the caller is asking, what about rooftop solar? If we were to put rooftop solar, will that help? maybe with regards to subsidies or to that extent. Maybe, Evan, you could jump in on this topic.
Yeah, I think rooftop solar absolutely would play an important role. We're not going to replace Grayson entirely with rooftop solar. We know that it's going to take a suite of technologies and options, but rooftop solar is a great alternative, particularly for customers at home. But for the city more broadly, you could certainly, rooftop solar should be part of the set of solutions that helps, take a power plant and go from a really big power plant to a smaller power plant. And then you've got other options that you can do to even shrink it even further. But rooftop solar absolutely today is a cost-effective, simple solution that's not going to replace the power plant entirely, but can go a long way.
Right, and the additional benefits of rooftop solar is that it becomes a distributed system. So you wouldn't have to transmit electricity all the way from Grayson all the way to
That's
a
right.
particular location and back and forth. So there's a lot of saving with regards to rooftop solar when it comes to the distribution, and maybe in the future they could have their own battery systems, which would help as well on the drain, on the general system. But on top of individual rooftop solar, we can do rooftop solar on city property, on city assets, and we should be flushing that a little bit more out to make sure that is the best alternative we are talking at this point.
Roland, I think we should also mention, why would the city be interested in increasing capacity to sell energy? Why would they need to
That's
sell
a
energy?
very good question, Frank. And they are increasing capacity by approximately 40 or 48 megawatts. And in the future, if we look, well, currently we don't need that extra capacity, but in the future, we will not need it at all. And given what we would generate and all the contracts that we have to purchase power, in approximately 2034, we're going to have excess power of about 250 megawatt that we don't need. So it's a good question as to why do we need all this power? Maybe if Frank, we can postulate or maybe hypothesize why you think they would need those.
One of the things that we see is that the city has been looking for sources of revenue for costs that are unfortunately unrelated to the utility and actually are being used for the general fund. One of the possibilities that we could consider is that they might be increasing those revenues to use them for something that is completely unrelated to providing power. And that's something that we really don't want.
And that is a concern, because not only are they doing it for indirectly to generate revenue, but they're doing it at the cost of our health, because this is a gas power generation plant which is going to put emissions. So is our health more important than the city generating? Before we go on the break, I want to take my last caller before we're going to take a small break. Hello, can I get your name and your question, please?
Hello, my name is Lori, and I was just calling to say how sad and disappointing it is to see our city not taking action to stand up against climate change. I'm 60 years old, and I was wondering if there's anything I can do to make a positive change in my community.
Thank you, Lori. Your question is very good. Definitely, we need to be involved. The Glendale Environmental Coalition, the Sierra Club, the Glendale Coalition for Better Government are mostly local, well, except for the Sierra, but I'm sure they get involved in local issues. But at least the Glendale versions of these organizations are very much involved in these. And it's very important that anybody who lives in Glendale gets involved. The key to government, passing things that on the hindsight you would say, how did they do that, is empathy. And if our citizens continue to not get involved, that we are hurting ourselves. So the first thing you can do, Lori, is stay in touch with the Glendale Environmental Coalition, the Sierra Club, or the Glendale Coalition for Better Government. Talk to your neighbors, encourage them to get involved. Most people don't know about this project going on, and that's the concern that Dan is the first thing that he expressed. The reason we are doing this show and these organizations are paying for this show is because we want to get the news out. I think the city could do a much better job in getting the information out. There have been a couple of local events that took care of it, but at this point, this is where we are, and we would like people to get involved. So for now, we're going to take a very brief break, and after the break, we will get back together and continue this very important